this episode, I'm about to share something tender and honestly still pretty raw that I've been unpacking about myself and my life and really how it relates to masking and ADHD. So, I was a colicky baby, and for the first 6 months of my life, I cried and screamed and didn't probably sleep all that much. And the story in my family was that I was a hard baby. But then something changed. At 6 months, I stopped crying. It became calm, quiet, and pleasant. And suddenly I was the perfect child. But here's what I've come to realize that shift wasn't just developmental, it was survival. It was masking. And it started way earlier than I thought. In this episode, I want to talk about how early experiences like this shape how we show up as ADHD women, especially those of us who became really good at being liked, being helpful, being easy. Let's explore together how this kind of early emotional abandonment can lead to people pleasing, self silencing, and the heartbreaking belief that our authentic self is too much. Welcome to the Self Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. So, as a child, I was colicky and I cried and cried for the first 6 months of my life to the point where, for my parents to have a quiet dinner together, my grandma would have to come over and pace with me. And that's the way the story was told to me. And lots of family members have reiterated this story, lots of laughter about how hard it was and how awful it was for them. And I totally get it. Listen. If you are a mother who has or has had a colicky baby, I in no way want to invalidate or minimize how painful that is for you because it truly is. It's very hard to watch your baby cry and not know how to get them to stop, especially when doctors still today are telling people that, oh, they'll outgrow it in about 3 months or so, maybe six, and not understanding the impact that it can have on us throughout our life. Because the truth is a lot of medical professionals still do not know how much the body keeps the score and from an early age. Because while we don't have narrative memory until about 18 months, because we don't have language yet, the hippocampus and other pieces that are involved in narrative memory are not really online till about 18 months on average. So, yes, we may not have words that go to the story, but we have images and body sensations and other behaviors that stem from a long time ago. So, I want to just say, like, if you're a parent and you have a colicky baby, I'm in no way ripping on parents with colicky babies. I get it's hard. But what I want to shine a light on as I share my origin story here is that while it is hard for parents, it's actually also hard for the baby. And the baby is also suffering. And the baby takes that suffering with them throughout their life, especially when the stories that are told throughout their life are that they were hard. And once they stopped crying, they were a good baby, which was my experience. And I'm not dissing on my family at all. I have a loving family. I know they all love and care about me and that they were doing what the doctor said at the time to do with a colicky baby. And sure, trying to support my parents in this hard situation, but it left a mark. And that's what I want to talk about. So, like I said, first of all, I was born a month premature. So that probably didn't help anything. Later years, my pediatrician told my mom that he thinks I probably also had reflux because some of my digestive system wasn't fully developed yet, having been born early. And that probably did not help matters with the colic. But basically, I was crying almost nonstop from the time I was born until I was about 6 months old, with the story from everyone in my extended family being, "Oh my gosh, it was so hard, blah, blah." And that the only way my parents could get a break is if someone else came over and had to pace with me so they could have peace and quiet. And again, don't get me wrong, I get why my parents wanted peace and quiet. They were 25 years old. Well, my dad, 24 and a half, but I get why that was hard. But for me, and being the hard baby who no one was helping, that was even harder. And so I want to talk about that messaging because, and again, I spoke about it a little bit because our brains are in a different place until 18 months in terms of memory and words. We do store memories differently, but we still store it. And that's something a lot of doctors don't know. In fact, I have a young relative who had open heart surgery when she was a child, and this was like 9 years ago, and the doctors said that she wouldn't, do it when they're young because they won't remember. And that was just 9 years ago. That was being told to the parents of this family member, and that is so incorrect. Our bodies remember everything that's ever happened to us, and it may not have narrative memory, but things that were traumatic have a way of sticking with us. And if you've heard me talk about the trauma of ADHD, you know that we particularly have sticky brains that tend to hold on to things. So I want to talk about how if you were a quote unquote hard baby until you became more pleasant in some way, which was for me not crying in a colicky way, you probably also got early messaging that you were more loved and better able, hmm, more palatable for people when you were quiet, pleasant, and sweet. And that's a message a lot of women get. So even if you're like, I didn't have any of that, you might still resonate with this because, I think it was Rosalind Wiseman. She wrote the book Queen Bees and Wannabes and talks about how all of us girls were taught to play nice, which meant quiet and not bothering parents. And the problem with that then is this relational aggression tends to bubble up in girls. And quite frankly, I believe also in women who don't do their inner work, which, no judgment, but it's just those wounds are not healed, right? So this may even resonate if you got the message any point in your life that people only wanted to be around you when you were pleasant. And, I was talking to someone about this. I can't remember which friend I was talking to for support, but she pointed out that the opposite of pleasant isn't necessarily unpleasant. So I'm not suggesting that we had to be unpleasant assholes and still get to be loved the same way, that we could intentionally go around hurting people and that meant we should have no consequences. That's not what I'm talking about here. But what I am talking about is getting to show up in our authenticity with who we are, with who our brain is, and even if that's unpleasant sometimes, still being loved, accepted, but more than accepted, embraced. And I'm not saying we are for everyone. I understand that I am not everyone's cup of tea, and I'm actually okay with that. And I actually prefer it because social interactions can be exhausting sometimes, especially with folks who are neurotypical and don't understand the ADHD experience and expect us to mask, not understanding how hard that is on us. And then it makes us not really feel connected in the relationship and instead just tired. So, like, I'm kind of glad we're not everybody's cup of tea because that helps us titrate who we do spend time with. But I want to talk a little bit about what this looks like in our adulthood. And this might resonate with you too. I thought I had worked through this, but inner work is sneaky because there's always layers. So in my 20s, I first went to therapy and I worked a ton on the negative self talk I had, the complete lack of connection to my body and awareness of my thoughts, which I now see was me disconnecting or even dissociating from those experiences because I was having to make myself small and pleasant to be loved and accepted and that people wanted to spend time with me. And that message is still here for women. I don't know if any of you are direct women, but many of us women who are direct, and oh my gosh, I got in so much trouble for this when I left math, where directness is valued even in women, as it should be everywhere. But I into the field of social work, where directness apparently was seen as condescending. And I would get in so much trouble, and I've talked to other ADHD women as well. But the thing is, just because someone feels condescended to doesn't mean you're being condescended. Sometimes when you're just being direct and communicating, someone may take something the way that they take it. They may perceive something not in the way that you are intending it or where your heart is. And that's not always our responsibility to fix, especially if that person has some self worth stuff or doesn't have an ability to hold people in unconditional positive regard. I'm kinda getting off the rails here, but I was having a conversation with some people the other day and talking about ADHD and masking and how tiring it is, and how there just seemed to be some not really seeing how it's different to mask with ADHD versus when neurotypicals mask. And don't get me wrong, I know neurotypical, especially women, have to mask to get through society, but society was also designed for the neurotypical brain, so you're not masking from the very core of your being. And so, while that can be hard, society doesn't just generally disapprove of or reject who you are fundamentally from your wiring. And so we were talking about it and using the example of, well, if someone walks in front of me, they're being rude. And I was thinking, well, what if? And this reminds me back when I was like in my yoga days, right? Like, and one of my teachers at the time was talking about compassion and releasing the anger that we feel. So for example, if you're driving and you're behind someone who takes a slow turn and you're like, "Oh my gosh, what the hell for the love of Pete? Turn already." But the reality is we don't know their story. We don't know what's going on with them. For all we know, they have a full crock pot of chili, right? And they don't want it to roll over, or maybe a vase of flowers that is like precariously balanced because they don't have any other options to transport that because they got it from a funeral unexpectedly, right? Like we don't know what's going on in people's stories. And so my point was like, how can we be compassionate about what someone else is going through? Like if someone cuts you off or if someone walks in front of you, what if they're not an asshole or even being rude? But what if instead they're having a hard day and their head is in the clouds about it? What if their mom just died and they're not attentive? And why does that still have to be perceived as rude? And if it is perceived as rude, is that really the problem of the person who's having a hard time? Or do other people have some responsibility to understand that we live in this world together and that not everyone's going to be perfect in every moment and shouldn't and that we shouldn't have to apologize for moments when we are less than pleasant or imperfect. And this really applies to ADHD because if we are completely unmasked in our ADHD, people say it's annoying. It can be really hard. And yet, I have a lot of clients who either are partnered with someone with ADHD or they have ADHD and their partner is doing this where they are like, I don't want to judge and shame this person for their ADHD and how their brain is. They can't help that. Instead, I want to have compassion as well as boundaries, right? Because when people are interacting with us, they have a right to their feelings. But it's also important to recognize that the way they are perceiving things can impact their ability to tolerate what's going on. If instead of personalizing someone as being rude when we are trying to talk circularly how we do with other people, or assuming someone's being rude when they walk in front of someone, what if instead the narrative was like, "Oh, I wonder what's going on for that person?" And I think that's an important shift to make because for us ADHDers, we can feel so boxed in that, like, this morning I was realizing just how much is in my head about not pissing other people off. When the funny thing is I generally don't care anymore what other people think, but it's more about not having to deal with their anger and their animosity towards the way my brain works, which is not my stuff, right? And so, how do we find this balance with other people who don't have ADHD or even people who do, where we get to be our authentic selves, but also be responsible for who we are and how we show up and how that might impact others? So that's a big piece of the conversation. But I want to get back to, what does this end up looking like? Well, if you got the impression that you were a hard baby because you cried, and then were a good girl because you were quiet and pleasant, then chances are you, for a while at least, but possibly still, have been masking using things like people pleasing and perfectionism, which are both strongly linked to overfunctioning. And that's because we have a strong need as humans to belong, to be accepted by other humans, because we need to be safe. And if we do not belong, if we are not accepted, then on a very fundamental level, things don't feel safe. But the problem is if all we do is mask to be more pleasant and palatable for other people, and we never just get to be our authentic self with how our brain is and interact the way that we naturally do in more circular conversation, then we're drained and exhausted. So many ADHD women talk to me about how drained and exhausted they are. And sure, some of it is because we, you know, aren't great at saying no to things, both other people and our own shiny object syndrome. And some of that is because we seek dopamine, but some of it is truly time blindness. We think something will just take a minute. And then, like 3 hours later, we're like, shit. But sure, some of our exhaustion can come from areas for growth around prioritizing and boundaries, things like that. At the same time, some of our exhaustion, some of our soul tiredness is from not getting to be ourselves and having to be pleasant and palatable for everyone else because our ADHD is inconvenient for them, not recognizing how inconvenient our ADHD is for us, right? Or like how, in my case, colic wasn't great for me as a baby. It wasn't, when I first started studying attachment, gosh, this was so long ago. As I was starting moving towards being trained in EMDR, so we're talking like 11, 12 years ago this was, maybe a little more. I was noticing some struggles with attachment, and I actually had a conversation with my mom, who my mom was so loving. I know that she loved me. And there are parts of me, though, that hold the colic memories that didn't feel that. And so I asked her about it. And I was like, hey, I'm noticing these attachment struggles. I know that you love me. I get it. And also, you were 25 years old with a screaming baby for 6 months straight. I gotta believe there were parts of you that hate me, and I'm not gonna judge you for that because I would have felt the same way. But is there any of that? Is any truth to that? Because I think my body felt that in some way and is connected to some attachment challenges that I face when connecting with others. And my mom, with her courage, she teared up and she's like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to feel that way, but there were moments I did." And we were able to hug it out, and I could see her 25-year-old self and how hard that was for her to want to love the hell out of this baby, and how the colic was what she actually hated. But that, as a newborn, you don't sense that. So we were able to work on some of that attachment stuff, which is partly why I think my mom is was such an amazing human when she was here. She's still an amazing spirit, but anyway. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because a lot of us, I mean, our ADHD was present as children. That's part of the diagnosis is ADHD exists when we're young. And so we get labeled things like too much, too sensitive, too dramatic, too loud, too messy, add "to" in front of whatever you were called. And when those labels happen, it impacts our ability to attach to people. It impacts our attachments. It impacts connection. And not because the people saying those things are mean or trying to hurt us necessarily. In most cases, they're just struggling with it. And they're trying their parts, their protective parts are just trying to like control the situation so they can handle it. And what their parts don't realize is that actually trying to suppress what's going on and control it is not the most effective way to deal with something, especially something like ADHD, which is a neurodivergence. So, as I'm bringing this up, I hope you're thinking about, like, oh, yeah, I can see how that happened. How, there's this moment that you learned that you get loved when you're easy, that you get loved when you're pleasant. And then how much that shaped how you masked. Being hyper capable, calm, accommodating, low needs, even parentified, where you're always helping others, but often not helping yourself. And so, how does this early masking lead to disconnection from your body, emotions, and needs? Well, number one, when we're kids, we need our parents or the people caring for us, our caregivers, to be people that we feel safe enough with and that we trust. And if they are not that way, if there's something that doesn't feel that way, we assume it must be us because I mean, this is all subconscious, but as babies and children, it we have to have some control in our destiny because if it's them, that's really scary because then we could no longer get our survival needs met. So instead, we internalize this message that, oh, I just need to do this to be more lovable. It's not them because that creates safety. But what that does, as we act that out, it makes us be disconnected from our body. We start to turn off those messages of discomfort, even hunger, maybe needing to go to the bathroom, even disconnect from our emotions and needs, because then we are easier. We're making ourselves easier and increasing the chances that our caregivers will stay around. And this may start in childhood, but I've seen it in so many of my clients with trauma and as well as with ADHD who have only ADHD related trauma, maybe not other complex trauma, but I see this a lot because it was a way of survival. But it ends up going into adulthood where there's still a disconnect from body sensations, emotions, and needs in a way that leads you to, first of all, shut all that down so that you're hyper independent and you don't need anything from anyone. But second of all, to often deny yourself. Further, this experience of chronic self monitoring, people pleasing, and perfectionism, it works for a while. It worked for me. It got me through graduate school and opening my first private practice. And though that private practice didn't go fantastically, and even to some degree, my second private practice, though I thought that one I'd already worked through all this, which whenever you think you've worked through everything, that's kind of laughable because there's always layers, right? So, this people pleasing perfectionism, what it does is it disconnects us from the core of who we are. It disconnects us from our authentic self. It disconnects us from our self energy. And it disconnects us from the divine feminine, which I replayed, re aired my interview of Eleanor de Poisson, who talks a lot about the divine feminine and wrote an awesome book about it. You can look at the podcast from, I think it was last week about that. But when we are disconnected in this way, guess what happens? Everything we do is less authentic and other people can feel it. So if you're a business owner in particular, especially an entrepreneur, and you're putting yourself out there and you're making videos or podcasts or products, people are going to sense some of that inauthenticity and it's not going to feel safe. So in order for us to first of all, not just feel safe for others so we can do well in life, but also feel safe within ourselves. We can begin to reclaim our full selves. And how do we do that? How do we reclaim our full selves? I mean, Some of it is small practices like journaling without editing, free writing things like, what do I want? What do I really want? And let yourself be inconvenient about it. You don't even have to tell anyone right now, but just what do you want? Even if it would inconvenience the hell out of everyone else. A lot of times when we think about that, when I think about what I really want, it's not even it's not even that wild, or it's more I just want to live my authentic life the way I want to live it. And I'm a kind-hearted, compassionate person. So I'm not like when I say that, it's not that I want to go on like murderous rages or anything. But a lot of times when we get down to it, what we actually want is not all that inconvenient, except that people have gotten used to us people pleasing and doing perfectionism and over functioning. And so then when we start actually being more authentic, when we start unmasking, people get pissed because we've changed the status quo. And perhaps in that, we start setting some boundaries. So people are no longer having access to things they had access to, and they just want it back. They're often not even mad at us. They're just mad they don't have the thing. We just happen to be in the way of the thing that they used to have that we took away with our boundaries. And so they just direct their anger at us. So some of this practice will also be learning how do we navigate our own big feelings, especially the ones that come up in response to other people's big feelings. Because I don't know about you, but I and a lot of the women I work with do things like some of the people pleasing isn't actually about making the other person happy. It's about avoiding their big feelings because it's exhausting enough navigating a world not designed for us without having to like deal with other people's feelings. And we already established boundaries are not great. We could work on energetic boundaries of I can't take that on. This isn't my stuff. Except the part that's hard about this and that requires the deeper work is that many of us, many of us grew up being told our ADHD was the problem, that we were the problem. And so then when someone's having a problem in our presence, we assume we are the problem. When in all reality, maybe it's just how they're perceiving the situation. Whereas perhaps if someone perceived the situation that, oh, people get to be who they are as humans, people get to have bad, imperfect days, and people get to be less than pleasant, and that's like, okay, it doesn't make them rude. That might not be our stuff. So you might take some time to sit with this. You might pause in the silence after listening to this episode and pull out your journal and free write and let yourself rediscover your unmasked self. So before I get into our closing, I want to tell you I'm so excited. I wrote a book. I wrote a journal book. I started it back in November, and if I was really good at marketing, I would have been teasing it the whole time, but, ADHD kind of forgot about that. Uh, but at any rate, I wrote a book, an actual physical book. It's a journal book, but it's more than just a journal book because it's an experience. It comes in this beautiful, like, keepsake box with hand-selected sensory items that will help you complete the self-loved ADHD woman ritual that I created as part of the journal book experience. And there's QR codes in there for things like a meditation and a self-love contract, like to help with accountability, all kinds of cool stuff. So this journal book experience that is just it's so special. I'm so excited about the other things that come with it. I kind of want to keep it a surprise, but they're just these beautiful items that will feed not just your mind, but also your soul and really help you with recovering and to stop playing small with ADHD. So, if you've been playing small with your ADHD, if all of this resonates and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, Jen, I've been trying to make myself pleasant for my entire life, this journal book experience is for you. And it's on pre-sale right now for only $59. I don't know how I'm going to run that, to be honest. Everyone says, oh, only do it 2 weeks to create urgency. Screw that. And we're just going to have it be pre-sale probably once I actually have like everything is ready to go and I'm able to like put out the items that people bought for pre-sale, then we'll switch over to the regular pricing. Probably will be around sometime in August when that happens. But right now, the delivery date we're looking at not later than August 31st, fingers crossed, possibly even earlier than that because it looks like everything's coming together. There's one piece that is being produced next week. So that'll get sent to the company that's sending it out for me. But anyway, that was a lot of detail, all to tell you that if you've been playing small with your ADHD, if you've been masking, if you've been trying to be more pleasant and quiet and easy for people, this book is for you. And it's not like a radical, like, "Blah, blah, blah, be who you are, F it all." I almost dropped the F bomb. That's funny. But seriously, it's not like one of those. It's a lot of inner reflection on how you want to show up, who you want to be, with a ton of support. There's also, it's like both reading and journal prompts in this journal book experience. And actually, I have it right here. This is actually the proof, so it doesn't have the hardcover that it will have, but this is it. And if you're interested, I would love if you check out the link in the description. It tells you a lot more about what this thing actually is, but it's actually a physical book, not an ebook. So all right, that's something fun. Check it out, share it with other ADHD women because here's the cool thing, the more people that are excited about it, then the lower the price is, and I might even be able to lower the price over time. We'll see. But for now, it's a $59 pre-sale, and that'll go up with the full price. So anyway, I hope this was helpful to you, and I just want you to remember, you're not difficult. You were never too much. You were just fully alive, and you still are. And it's safe to come home to that version of you again. My heart is with you, friend, as you navigate these waters of being ADHD in a world not designed for us. And I fully expect I'm going to get some nasty grams from people as I put this out there because people want to make ADHD bodies act like non-ADHD bodies, just like people want female bodies to act like male bodies and gay and trans bodies to act like cisgendered straight body, right? So it's like the whole thing. I fully expect I'm going to get some nasty grams for this. So we're in this together and let's start a movement. Let's be more of who we are. All right. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.